So for an unsurprising amount of you, there is discourse. When you see Twitter discourse, just like assume a couple of things. Somebody lost and they're salty. They're just venting into the wind, right? Because Twitter is short form. It's you just type some shit and then you just say it and then you're mad or whatever, right? That's just the nature of the beast. But you know me, I don't like to talk about something if I don't think that there's a higher level, okay? I don't think that the people whose tweets I'm showing right now are wrong or their opinions are incorrect or they don't have some kind of truth to what they're saying, okay? For some reason, every time I do something like this, someone's like, well, Sajam says X and Y said such and such, and it's not true. I like both of the people whose tweets I'm gonna show. I'm just giving you some examples. So, fighting games nowadays been taken away from unique playstyles, and that kind of sucks. It was nice seeing different playstyles, rather it be lame, aggressive, neutral base, etc. Now they're just trying to make everybody play rushdown style, which I just don't think suits everyone, says Punk the God. And then Arslan Ash, Tekken 8 be like heat burst, heat smash, power crush, heat engager, throws 10 computers, analyzer, speakers. And he says, seriously, why do they even bother giving each character a variety of moves? And there's been a lot of posts about Tekken players with like similar kind of stuff. Everybody's swinging with big old moves and rush down and heat aggression, be aggressive. The thing that I think is interesting is that these two in particular, they are targeted, right? Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts. Punk for Street Fighter V had the literal best playstyle in the world to play that game. He just won constantly in that game. And same thing with Arslan Ash. However, the big thing to think about, if you've read this article and you thought about fighting games, modern fighting games in particular recently, you probably saw this, which was Guilty Gear devs wanted Strive to destroy Exerd. This is just clickbait. The decisive difference between Strive and Exerd is that Strive was made to destroy Exerd, he said. In that sense, we were trying to make Exerd an example of a failure. Of course, it wasn't a failure, but we had to change the direction completely. We had to be prepared for that. What does this mean? You know, they have to start from scratch and build a new game with new influences, with new goals, with new things that they want to accomplish when making the game, right? So the same thing happens with Tekken. I'm sure you saw Harada's tweets about how the game was boring in Tekken 7 and heat and aggression, and they want the game to be faster. And the same thing for Street Fighter 6, clearly designed away from a lot of the things that were really common in Street Fighter 5. The way both of these games are played at the highest level is very defensive. Crouching medium kicks and hit confirms, very low commitment. All movement was just checked or challenged. People just hitting you with buttons that are one hit confirmable. If you blocked it, you know, okay. And if you didn't block it, boom, one hit confirm. Corner carry, play safe offense that's like really risk averse. And Tekken 7, what was the end game of Tekken 7? You just watch Knee versus Arslan, they're just backdash, jab, backdash, jab. Game 1 ends, go back to character select, pick an infinite stage, doom, bwah, 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 and Arslan Ash is just backdashing away from everybody. I totally see in particular why they would be frustrated. The modern games that look at the last game and decide to change, they're actually just changing away from their exact playstyles, right? Their exact matches were probably what the devs were watching and they were like, I'm sick of this shit. And these players will still be good at the next game, but that totally makes sense. It totally clicks why it would feel that way. And you can think about some of the choices they made, right? In Tekken, if you're just blocking, there's chip. There's ways to like force interactions more often, and there's more ways to initiate and stop your opponent from running. There's no infinite stages in the game. Think about Street Fighter 6, like the way endgame Street Fighter 5 was played, lots of staggered offense on plus frames, one hit confirms, like really safe play. If your opponent ever did anything, you just view reversal it. In this game, drive reversals are bad because view reversals are really powerful in the last game. And they didn't make lots of hit confirmable pokes, right? Like they immediately nerfed light safe buffers into drive rush in this game. They didn't want people sitting there just light buffer, not engaging with the other person. They didn't want the game to be about that. They want drive gauge to be something that you spend and exchange and trade and use. Street Fighter 6 is like undoubtedly a more complexly built game in terms of managing system. There's tons of interactions and there's tons of decision making you have to make. And it's a game that's clearly built wide enough to be a struggle to control everything, right? And in 5, I think there were players that could deal with everything. Or in 7, you could sit there and deal with everything. And I think they don't want their games to boil down. If the game can be slowed down reliably because the offensive options or like the options in neutral are not very strong, what ends up happening is that the game will just be less is more. Like when you guys watch Punk win in 5, it looks like his opponent can't play the game because he just is the best in the world at playing footsies and one hit confirms. He makes his opponents, who are the best players in the world besides him, look stupid because they have to commit, but the options to commit are not that strong. They have to try something, and then when they try something, they die. Sort of how the game can boil down if it's too easy to control the pace of the match. Daigo had like a description of it, which is like, if the best choice in the game is to do nothing, then the game is like bad, right? Because playing and actively moving and hitting buttons, putting you in a worse spot feels bad. Like you're not moving the joystick, you're not touching the buttons. You're like, my best decision is just to sit here and do nothing. The impressive thing is doing nothing while the opponent has strong tools to try and open you up. The game is more interesting if it's hard to deal with stuff rather than like if it's easy. You could slow Street Fighter 6 way down as an example and make the game really defensive, make drive reversal really strong. You could do all these changes to slow the game down a lot, but like, does it make for a better game? I'm not sure. It just makes for a game with far less action. Let's say they made the hit confirm windows wider or something in Street Fighter 6 as an example, like the things people wanted, right? They want the game to be slower. What ends up happening is like if all your buttons are one hit confirmable, no one spins drive gauge in neutral. You just sit there hitting your safe medium over and over and over until it hits, and then you hit confirm drive rush and then do your combo and then take your offense, and then if that doesn't work, you go back to poking in mid-range with your safe medium that you can hit confirm over and over. Like they were afraid of that. They wanted spending drive gauge to like be you spending drive gauge and not, you just sit on it like a pile of fucking coins like you're a dragon. That's also why they create games with better offense and defense generally, because if defense is better, then like the game doesn't get played. You can just sit there and defend, and then the other person can't hit you. To give you an example of like when you make defense too strong, do you guys remember the snap meta in Dragon Ball FighterZ? And it was season 2, right? Whenever people hit you, they would snap your character out, and then incoming has a fixed timing, and your opponent could string you up and do like whatever pressure sequence they want and then run whatever mix-up they wanted on you. The reason snap meta existed, it was the only way to gain offense in the game, like at all, that was actually meaningful and consistent. And it's because defense was way too strong. The mix-ups were generally reactable or like fuzzyable, or like there's OSs to deal with them. The reflect in the game is instant. You could instantly reflect whatever your opponent was doing. And then when you got knocked down, there was like a million wake-up timings. You could change how fast you got up. You could tech up or down. You couldn't force a real mix-up. The only way to get offense was to like hit someone, vanish, snap in their character, and then when they were coming in on incoming, they didn't have access to reflect, that you could then do a real offensive sequence. Because otherwise, the game just like couldn't support offense that was like consistently good enough. It was just so hard to consistently stick to someone and run mix-ups that the best strategy in the game was to just snap their team 800 times around. It looked so gross because you would just hit them, snap the character out, run the offensive sequence on the next character, hit them, snap the character out. You would be killing the team like 20% life per character at a time. How did they fix that? They made it so that snaps didn't leave you up close, and then you could change the timing of the snap. But they changed the game in a lot of other ways too. I think the power level of Dragon Ball in like the older versions was too low for a versus game, and it led to stuff like that. People had to like dig deep to like find cheap shit, and like the cheap shit was just like consistently getting okie, consistently getting like a mid. Like I'm not asking for much, right? Pre-pandemic especially, I used to host casuals at my house a lot. Original Grand Blue was the most mad everybody has ever been playing any game at my house. I have never ever had a game cause more frustration in casuals ever than 1.0 Grand Blue, and it's because like the game was so slow, and the way you lost in the game was like the other person was just playing better neutral than you, so you lost. Like there's no being crafty. There's no like, how do I sneak past your offense? It wasn't interesting. It's not like I was holding down space and playing so well. It was like my character had better neutral and I had better neutral, so they just couldn't get in. Not even to like oh, you don't like footsies, but like the approach was too weak. It's very clear that the new game is a reaction to that, right? Like they built in dash attacks so that out of your run, you could engage instead of just dying. But like Street Fighter 6 is a more difficult game to make the right decisions in than 5, as an example. Or like even older Street Fighter. There's so many things to manage at once. Like your gauge, your opponent's gauge. Your moves have like multiple different ways that they can combo. There's like regular hit, counter hit, punish counter, drive rush, regular hit, counter hit, punish counter on like every normal or confirm you do. Moves change frame data dramatically all the time because of drive rush and burnout. Drive gauge itself has impacts on your neutral, offense, defense, every part of the game. And then your super gauge, which exists separately, impacts the drive gauge when you spend it. Every time you spend a level 1 or a level 2, you are reducing your opponent's drive gauge and winning the round or winning the interaction or whatever, but you're not having a level 3, which means you can't correct your drive gauge later on. So like if you're spending level 1s and level 2s and your opponent's not, your opponent will naturally be able to swing the drive gauge 4 bars. And without super gauge, You cannot interact with the drive gauge when you're in burnout because it's the only way for you to escape the eye. Keeping track of all the different factors of what's going on is really difficult. And then there's also really difficult decisions to be made on defense and offense around the strong system mechanics to gain you plus frames or get you out with parry. A game being more aggressive means less interactions to win, means more volatile results wise. And that's not true. Like, you know, the game Footsies by High Fight, you die in one hit. And in Strive, I don't die in one hit. It's funny because, like, even games where there should be extreme variance, because, like, you would think, oh, the gameplay is, like, really ham. Games like Strive or Marvel, or games that, like, should be extremely high variance because power level of the characters is really high and it's really easy to die. Games are very consistent. I don't know how ridiculously powerful you have to make the game for it not to be consistent. The other thing is that in these kinds of games like Tekken and Street Fighter, it's not just like, oh, there's like 10 people who are world class. There's like, I don't know, 80 or something. Sometimes some player has a bad weekend and gets 33rd or something because the field is really powerful and not necessarily even because of the game. These two, they want to play slower. The easier the game is to slow down, the more that fits their playstyle in particular. And if the game fits their playstyle better, like, I mean, they're literally the best in the world. Now, do I agree that this game has like only rushdown style? Like, obviously not, right? Like, I mean, if you watched Chris Wong and you watched any Luke this entire season, the way Luke wins is not really by rushing down, right? He just kind of sits there and walls you out. The best character in the game is like not even trying to rush you down. He's just sitting there. And it'll be like that. I'm sure Tekken 8 will develop similarly. There'll be lots of characters that don't have to just play offensive the whole time. Like, think about the best characters in Street Fighter. Like, a lot of them are not like that, right? It's like, that's not what JP's doing. That's not what Guile's doing. That's not what Chun-Li's doing. In fact, the characters that do that kind of got considered worse as the season goes on, right? And I do expect, right, that they'll tone down some of the offensive stuff in this game. Because I'm sure that they also agree that, like, Jerry doing fireball drive rush or like DJ doing drive rush is like, you know, it's a little too annoying. Or like Ken drive rush jab, which they already targeted. So like, I'm sure that they're gonna try and like change that a bit. If Arslan Ash and everybody and all the Korean players and like all the top players are constantly like, this fucking Tekken game is so aggro, it sucks ass, like it'll have an impact. Like eventually either less people will be interested in playing the game because Arslan Ash and everybody says the game sucks all the time, or the devs will be like, well, maybe we can make it slightly less, or maybe we can do it slightly. You know what I mean? There's a chance that they'll adjust it. And I mean, there's a lot of power in that. When games get patched, especially modern games, the public opinion about characters is very important. I mean, there's a reason that this weekend, all everybody complained about was how bad Zato was. And Ark says they had a list of 3 things that they knew was too overpowered or like needed changes. There was like 2 system mechanics, and then we know Zato is too weak. You guys remember how vile people were about 5 and 7. Like, everything I'm doing is just extremely high variance, and like it's just really swingy, and like they built the game like this and that, and etc. But the end games of both of those games were like extremely defensive, and like people were yapping. And now we have like a pretty different pace, like both Tekken 8 and Street Fighter 6. There's more offensive oriented things to do. They didn't make it so that you can just sit there and do nothing. People are upset. It could be different people for different reasons. It could be the same people for different reasons. It's a hard thing to balance. Fighting game design is really difficult. And the truth is, you can't satisfy people. You know, you have to just make a game that you think is fun and interesting and like you believe in. And obviously it needs to make money, but like that's another problem. Modern games change a lot too, so they might not end up being what you want to play either. The way Street Fighter 5 started versus where it ended are not for the same people. And I'm sure 6 will be that way. When 2XKO comes out and the game's out for like 5 years, like the things you liked about the game in launch will not be the same as like how the game is like X amount of years into the future or whatever, right? Like it's not gonna be the same.